Hello, Internet. So nice to see you, and welcome to Theory Talk Live. I'm Tommaso of musictheoryforguitar.com, and we are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. So, guys, I just want to see who's around in the chat, just to say hi to some of you. Oh, hi, Jere, from Finland, right? Nigel, I know a few of you guys. It's interesting. Steve, nice. Oh, people from India, people from Toledo. How are you guys? You are from all over the world. I like that. Very good. So today we'll be talking about how music theory helps everything you do on guitar. It helps your soloing, it helps your self-expression, it helps even your physical practice. Okay, so, and I'll be speaking with a very special guest today. Now, not only is a guitar playing breakthrough specialist that has helped probably thousands at this point of guitar players all over the world to overcome their challenges. Not only is a guitar teacher coach that certifies other top guitar teachers. But you know what? He's also been a teacher of mine too. And I really, really learned a lot from him when I was a student. I am, of course, talking about Tommaso. Hi, Tommaso.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic.
So I have actually a question that people ask me in the chat some time ago. It was if you and I are related, because apparently we look like each other.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so you're not coming out halfway through this this chat and you say, Tommaso, I am your father, stuff like that.
No relation.
No relation at all, indeed. Okay, very good. Okay, Tommaso, I have a few questions for you. So I'll start with this. I've noticed that some guitar players, most guitar players actually, when they start, they concentrate all their effort on practicing physical technique, on literally grabbing their instrument and trying to do something on the guitar, okay? And they completely neglect theory. They don't even want to see it for some reason, okay? I personally, I'm biased because, I specialize in music theory after all. So, but I think there is a missing opportunity there for beginner player, intermediate player, people who don't know their theory yet, okay? Because I think theory can actually help them practicing way more efficiently, way more effectively. So I want to hear your thoughts about all that.
Well, yeah, neglecting theory is something that creates an immediate imbalance in one's playing. I think we may have a little echo, Tommaso. You might want to mute your side so it doesn't bounce back. But yeah, when you have a student or you're just observing guitar players, when they neglect the music theory side of things, even early on, it immediately creates an imbalance. So some of the technical aspects of their playing start to develop, but the theory lags behind. It never really grows along with the technique and the other things that they know. So the longer that one delays the learning of theory, the more this imbalance between the two sets of knowledge and skills grow. And then there are consequences to this, okay? So one of the consequences is that it often makes people feel insecure as players. They know that they're no longer a beginner over here on the technique side. But over here on the theory side, they still feel like they don't know anything. They can do stuff, but they don't really know what they're doing. And it just makes them feel more insecure about their playing overall. Okay. And then that often creates an acceptance to some level that these imbalances are not a big deal or okay. They don't really have any real consequences. So that often creates the thought that theory isn't really that important. Hey, I got by so far without theory. Why can't I just keep going without it? That seems like work, the theory stuff. Why can't we just keep on playing and learning songs and licks and whatever else? But I think that, the attitude of, hey, I got by this far without it. Why can't I just keep going? The one thing that's really missing, I think, other than the obvious lack of knowledge there, is that people don't know. People who evade learning music theory tend not to know how much more enjoyable music can be and how more fun guitar playing can be with theory than without it. I mean, having an understanding of being able to do things and knowing what you're doing and knowing how the things you're playing that make you feel a certain way, why it makes you feel a certain way is really important, I think. And I think that most things about guitar playing become much harder to learn and master without the theory knowledge to go along with it. So for example, songwriting, harder now. Improvising, harder. Soloing, harder. Phrasing, harder. Getting gigs, harder. Application of your skills, going to be harder. Integrating your skills and knowledge together, much harder. And even just raw practicing is harder. So all of those elements become more difficult to advance in without understanding theory behind all that stuff going on. So now you can, of course, improve your guitar playing without theory. It's not that you must have theory in order to improve. You can improve without it to a certain extent and within certain categories. But it's going to take a lot longer to get there. It's going to be a lot more work. It's going to require more practice hours. It's going to be a lot more frustrating. And you're not going to ever reach your full potential, if you don't know the theory. Even if you take guitar lessons from whoever, right? Even if you're taking lessons, if what you focus on in the lessons is everything technical and there's no theory knowledge there, that gap continues to expand. Everything's going to be slower and more frustrating, and it's going to be more expensive. I mean, it's going to be more, you'll have to pay more money over a longer period of time to whoever you're taking lessons from to get to the level you want to get at with no theory knowledge, because now the teacher's going to have to play this acrobatic, go like this, in order to try to deliver you to the place you want to be. He or she, knowing you don't have the theory, you're just going to pay more to get the lessons to the same level. But I mean, you have to take longer lessons. So it literally is more expensive. So if and I mentioned this because sometimes people don't really, they'll seems like they don't really care how long things take. I don't know why people would not care how long things take. But if they don't really care, if they think, I got all the time in the world, most people do care about the money they spend. And if they're having to spend more to get to the same result, that's, why do that? Why not? Let's get there faster. So anyway, that's my thoughts on, what happens when people evade music theory. And you can get better, but it's going to take longer. It's going to be more frustrating. And it's going to be more expensive.
Since I know you are a car enthusiast, I have this metaphor in my mind when people tell me that they're learning technique but not theory. It's like they are having a very, very powerful car with a very, very powerful engine, but no steering wheel and no brakes. So they can go very fast in one direction, and they cannot even choose the direction, okay? But they cannot decide where to go, okay? And it's incredible how many people I meet, for instance, how many students I meet that they can play even pretty fast. They can shred. They can literally shred. They can go to those scales as fast as they want, but they have no idea what they're doing. And when you ask them to improvise something simple, they have no idea what to do. They have simply no idea how to make music with that. So I think that's the thing. It's theory gives you your steering wheel. Theory shows you where you can point all the power you have. But without that, I think part of the problem, and I wanted to comment on that in a moment, part of the problem is that theory gets a very, very bad name, especially online, because theory has been taught in an academic way so far. I mean, even if you go to music school, even if you talk to people who've been to music school, some of them have still no idea why they're learning theory, okay? It's like they're teaching you all the boring part, honestly. Okay, those are this is how to read music. Those are the signature in the key signature, not alteration in key, and this and that. But they never teach you, apparently, how to express emotion with music, which is what I like, by the way, because otherwise, what's the point of theory? Any comments on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little funny that you mentioned the car examples, and you mentioned it being a steering wheel because the for those people who don't know, I own some old classic muscle cars, and the fastest one is a pro street car, and it's only set up to go straight. So your analogy doesn't work here, buddy, because this car only goes straight. I mean, I drive it on the street, but it's really meant for drag racing, where the steering wheels hold it straight and hold on for your life and go fast. So yeah. But anyway, the point is, when I went to university to study music, I was a music composition major. So I was going to school for the explicit purpose of learning more about how to compose music. I wasn't there for guitar playing, although of course I play guitar there. But the point is that sitting in all the music theory classes and the counterpoint classes and all of the other music theory related classes, it's easy for one to see that, or one to get the idea that music theory is about a bunch of rules. Because when you are sitting in a class setting, you have to learn the principles, right? You learn how music theory works, and it is presented as if there are rules. And as you well know, music theory is not a set of rules. But if you're trying to pass a class, you got to be presented with the principle, see examples of how it was applied throughout history. And then often there's some writing involved, writing assignments where you'll have to write, various 4-part chorale parts or whatever, where you are demonstrating your knowledge of the rules of theory in terms of how they can be applied. But in real life, those rules don't exist. They are not rules. They're just meant to show why music feels the way it does. So that's the essence of music theory, as you well know.
Yeah, it's always good to repeat that there are no rules in music theory. It's just a way to explain it. Okay, it's just it reminds me like the old counterpoint text from the 1600 when they tell you those are the rules, follow these, and then 2 chapters later they're like those are the rules and they're completely different. Okay, it's because the rules are the rules of the exercise, not the rules of the theory. So some people read only the first chapter and they get into the impression that there are rules in music theory, while on the other hand, it's not that. It's just setting up a little playground, a little sandbox with specific rules so you can explore those. And then you set up a new sandbox with new rules and you explore those and so on and so forth. It's like when kids play. They make up the rules and they play a little game, and they change the rules and they play a little game. And that's how we work in music theory. The rules are not universal. The rules are not for everything we do, essentially. So good. I have another question for you here. I was thinking that always on the matter of music, of physical technique. Physical technique is, of course, incredibly important. Okay, meaning if you have zero physical technique, you're not playing anything on the guitar. Okay, I think it's something that people should practice. Okay, and that's the other thing. I always think that guitar technique and music theory should go in parallel, because we were saying before that some people are unbalanced. The unbalance works in both directions. People can also have too much theory and not enough physical practice. It's more rare, that's much less, but it's an imbalance and it can happen. Okay, but physical technique is just one thing you can practice on the guitar, and not definitely the most important, absolutely, when you want to express yourself. So I think that phrasing, for instance, and I know you know what I mean, but for people in the audience, with phrasing I mean stuff like bends, vibratos, slides, hammer-on, pull-off, any kind of expressive elements we play in our music. I think phrasing is much more important than that. I'd like your comment on that.
Well, I can answer that in one sentence. I couldn't agree more. I mean, yes, and yes, 1,000 times yes. Phrasing, in my opinion, is the single most important aspect of guitar playing, more than the development of your ear or music theory knowledge or your technique or anything else. Of course, those other things are required. Phrasing is sort of where they start to come together. Phrasing, improvisation, songwriting, creating solos, whatever. But if you look at just a single aspect of guitar playing, in my opinion, phrasing is by far the most important. And it's a little bit ironic because if you go to Google or you go to YouTube and you look at what all of the articles, the lessons, all the videos that are out there that all these people create, it's all about here, play like Metallica or play fast or learn this or do this. There's very few things on phrasing out there. People don't generally search for it. They don't seek it out because everybody wants to play fast, or everybody wants to learn songs, or everybody wants to get their technique together. And then, as you mentioned, there are people who, and they're usually technical minded people, often with engineers. I've had, many students that are in the engineering field, just have had a lot of students over the years. So you're going to have a bunch of those too. And they tend to be the ones that just really love the theory more so than picking up the guitar. They want to understand everything more than they want to play. So there's, they're the opposite of the guy who just wants to shred all day and doesn't even want to know what's going on and what he's doing. But yeah, I totally agree with what you said, 1,000%.
And people at this point are wondering why we are mentioning phrasing in an interview about theory. So I think phrasing has a lot to do with theory. I think there are lots of parallels between phrasing and theory, and knowing a little bit of theory helps you also choosing the best phrasing. I know you have something to say about that, so I want to hear it.
Well, I actually got quite a bit to say about this in particular. Music, in my opinion, music theory's greatest gift to all of us is that it can tell you exactly what emotional options exist on the guitar. Okay, so you're holding your guitar in your hand, and now you're gonna improvise, or you're gonna write a song or a solo, or just jam with your buddies or whatever. If you really know music theory to a pretty deep level, you will know where any emotion exists on the guitar in any given context, over the track, over the chord being played in this particular sense, in this key. Okay, so without that knowledge, you're just kind of guessing. It's just all trial and error. And the problem with trial and error is all the error. Okay, the more you know about music theory, the less trial and error there is, and that you can predict the emotions that you want to express. You know where they are, and you just go play them. In the same way that we don't need dictionaries when we want to talk and express ourselves. We have thoughts, we have feelings, and then we express those fluently. Some people express themselves more eloquently than others, but generally we can all talk and communicate. On music, it's more of a lot of trial and error. Let's string words together and see what happens. Okay, that wasn't so good, so let's delete those words and let's try it again. I mean, imagine if we tried to communicate that way with our voices or in writing. It would just be a total disaster. It wouldn't, be very good. So the point is, when you really understand music theory on a deep level, you can predict exactly where the emotions are in any given context, and then you just go there to what it is that you want to say. And the purpose, in my view, the purpose of phrasing is to manipulate the emotion that already exists there in the music. So, for example, if you and I are playing together and you're playing chords and there's a backing track and et cetera, so there's already a background, there's a platform for me to then improvise a melody or a guitar lick or whatever on top of. So the emotion is already partially there. The basis of the emotion already exists before I play a single note. So with the note choices and the phrasing, what I'm trying to do is exaggerate or either enhance or alter the emotion, the base emotion that already exists. Okay. So beyond the technical aspects of phrasing, such as, the bends and slides and vibrato and stuff that you alluded to earlier, there are the note choices of phrasing on the micro level. For example, non-harmonic tones and things like that. So let's talk about that for a moment with non-harmonic tones. For those who don't know, a non-harmonic tone is any note that you play over a given chord that's not in that chord. So if the chord being played is C major, the chord tones, of course, are C, E, and G. All other notes are non-harmonic tones. They're not part of the harmony being played in this moment. Okay. So whether the note, if you play a B note, that's not part of a C chord. It would be part of a C major seventh chord, but it's not part of the triad that's currently being played. So if you don't know what the various non-harmonic tones are, And if you don't know, I mean, in advance, you don't know them. If you don't know how they're set up, because every non-harmonic tone, it has a preparation, a dissonance, and a resolution in traditional music theory, at least. Okay. If you don't know that, then you're just noodling around playing notes, hoping to stumble upon something that sounds good. And when you do that, what's likely to happen is you end up playing things that fall easily under the fingers, a lot of stock licks and patterns, and your fingers kind of do a lot of the creating for you, not really your mind where you're planning out, oh, I'm going to do this non-harmonic tone at this point. So for example, anticipations, passing tones, neighbor tones, escape tones, trying to remember them all, suspensions, retardations, appoggiaturas, pedal points, all of those are examples of non-harmonic tones, and they all, some of those can be accented or unaccented, some of them can be diatonic or chromatic, etc. So that's just one little example. That's just one little piece of music theory. If you know that, and then you're going to improvise, create, melodies or a solo or whatever, you can do so much more because you immediately know what all of these various options are. You'll know from experience and the knowledge what they're going to feel like. That's the key. Knowing in advance, if I do this in this context, it's going to feel like this, specifically this. Okay? That is so extremely valuable. The other thing is that, as I mentioned, music theory predicts the emotion of music that we're going to make. So, for example, if you play a chord, let's say any major triad, G major, A major, doesn't matter, and I play the third of that major triad in isolation, meaning I'm not playing any other notes, you're not playing any of the chords yet. All we've got in this snapshot in time is your chord, let's call it A major, and I'll play the third over that chord, which in this case would be C sharp. That emotion is going to be very predictable every single time. So if you now change chords from A to, let's say, E, and I play the third over that chord, and right now we're still talking about chords in isolation, not yet combining the chords. That adds another layer to the emotional elements that are happening. But right now, just looking at isolation, the emotion will be identical. A lot of people don't know that. It's identical. So if you then change chords to G major, and I play the third on top of that major triad, again, assuming the chord is in isolation for now, the emotion that I'm going to create is, again, identical, because the relationship between major triad and the third played on top, again, assuming an isolation, is identical regardless of the chord or the note that I'm playing, as long as it's the third over the major key. Well, that's true. That concept is true for any chord and any note combination. So for example, if we move to a minor chord, you're playing a minor chord and I play the ninth on top of that minor chord, it's going to have a very specific and distinctive emotional result every single time. And it's going to be 100% reliable, assuming, again, chords and notes in isolation. Things start to evolve when we add those isolated things into a context. But in order to understand how that happens in context, we first need to understand what happens when they're isolated, okay? And that though the base emotion being created is 100% reliable, it's the same emotion every single time. That is, so when I learned that myself years ago, that unlocked so many doors for me, because now I had a predictable way to create the emotions I wanted. And then I had to learn about what happens when we change the context or bring in other things. Well, there are ways to deal with that. But the starting point is to understand, in my view, the starting point is to understand single note over a particular chord type and that relationship and the reliable emotion it always causes. But, it also predicts, music theory now, in terms of phrasing, it also predicts the emotion in every possible tonal music context. Tonal music means music that's in a key or a mode, okay? So any note that you can play over any chord in a tonal context is going to have a reliable, 100% guaranteed, the base emotion gets created, 100% reliable, 100% of the time, assuming isolation context. So musicians and guitar players who don't really know their theory won't ever know this stuff nor are they ever going to be able to use it in a reliable way. That doesn't mean that they can't create music that has emotion to it, but it means that they won't have a reliable way to be able to create that specific motion in this specific moment every single time that they want to create that. Instead, they'll have to use trial and error. And maybe they'll land on that emotion. Maybe they'll create a different one. All right. And going back to the speaking example, if we're trying to talk and you want to find just the right word in just the right moment, that's pretty important. If you are using different words in the wrong contexts, then the communication is not as accurate as you probably would have intended it to be. The person listening won't understand what you're trying to express in a reliable way. So for me as a guitar player or as a composer or an improviser, what my top priority is accuracy of expression. That is it. That's everything. I don't really care about playing guitar fast. I mean, I've got some good chops, but that, whatever. There are other people who've got good chops the same as I do or better. Okay. I don't care about all of the everything else is a tool. Okay. The technique is a tool. Music theory is a tool. Your ear training is a tool. These are all powerful, very powerful tools, but yet they're still tools. What is the point of the toolbox? Where are we going? Why do you have a toolbox with tools in it? Well, for me, the only reason I have a toolbox with music theory, ear training, technique, etc. in it is because I want to be as accurate as possible in expressing the exact specific emotions that I want to express in any given context at any time, 100% reliable all the time. That's my goal. That's literally my life's work in music goal is this. Everything I practice is for that one and only goal. Everything else, there are other goals that one could have. There are other things that are cool about music, and that's great. That's just not what my goal is. So for me, everything serves that one purpose. And the other thing is, by thinking about music in this way and learning music theory and having it apply to things like phrasing or anything that you're doing, it makes everything about mastering the guitar and mastering music so much easier than by not having this. Okay. And the fact is, it's really not that hard to learn music theory. If you've got a good teacher who really understands what the textbook says, but understands music theory well and understands the emotional connection between music theory concept or principle and the resulting predictable emotion that it creates, that's the person that you want to learn from. Okay. And I know this is something that you teach a lot. Okay. The point is that anyone can learn this stuff. You did. I did. Thousands of your students have. My students have. I mean, this is something that anyone can learn. So that's my thoughts on it.
I have a comment in chat that I want to comment on again. And it's this. It's about phrasing. I think listening to a lot of music can give some ideas about phrasing, which is true. It comes from the inside, right? And I think this highlights a specific misconception. And again, not a problem. I know Daniel. He's a nice guy. He knows what he's doing. Hi, Daniel. But I want to spotlight this for a moment because people think that we have two ways of learning, by theory and by ear. And I don't really see the difference. Meaning, you have formally two ways. You can not know what you're doing and go by trial and error, like you were saying, for years and years and years and years. And what you end up is that you think you're doing everything by ear, but in reality, you just rediscover all the music theory without giving it names, so in an inefficient way, because you don't have name for those concepts. And you just know that when you do something, you get a specific emotion. Or you can sit down, or you can learn a little bit of theory, apply it on the guitar, and actually learn theory and purposefully, deliberately find those emotions, chase the emotion you want, and then develop those. I don't see any dichotomy between learning by ear and learning by theory, in the sense, because when you learn by ear, you have to listen to it. It's not that you take a book, read the book, close the book, you're done, okay? You open the book, you read 3 sentences, you grab your instrument and start trying. That's how it works. And like this thing about things coming from the inside. Yes, it's true that the emotion comes from the inside, but to say an unpopular thing, but it will make sense. We don't play from the heart. We play from the heart through our brain, through our hands. The heart gives you the emotion you want to express, and that's great, and you must have that. But then the brain tells you how to express this emotion. And if you don't have this part, your heart can have all the emotion you want. It's very, very hard to translate it on the guitar, and this leads to a lot of frustration. And theory is just a way to bridge your heart and your brain and your hands and your guitar all together so that you can actually express all that. People have this misconception, in my opinion. And I see a few people in the chat too, thinking that theory is against playing from the heart, when in reality, it's just the way to play from the heart. It's just a way to open the way between your heart and your instrument. Or at least, that's what I think. I think you agree. The way I know you, I think you agree. Okay. At this point well, I want to comment on another things. I think, let me see if I can find the link again. That's a different thing. Just a second then. But before that, okay, yeah, that's it. We need to comment on that, Tommaso. I think they're talking about you.
There's no way it's real, huh? Well, it's pretty real.
It's pretty real.
What can I say?
Yeah. Okay. And one thing that people say at this point when we talk about phrasing is stuff like, I don't know, Eric Clapton or David Gilmour or other people like that can say more in one note than Yngwie Malmsteen can say in 1,000 notes. And
I can destroy that argument in one word.
Please.
Black Star. Black Star. Go listen to Black Star. There's one long sustained note in Yngwie Malmsteen's Black Star, the first track on his first solo album. I'll put that note up against you name the guitar player, anyone. You want to make the comparison? Let's make that comparison. Go listen to Black Star, and then come back and tell me if you still have the same opinion. And if you do, fine. But there's a lot of emotion dripping there.
Yes, exactly. I think people hear a lot of notes from Malmsteen and they forget that he has a great phrasing, absolutely great, fantastic phrasing, which is what a lot of Malmsteen imitator don't have, because a lot of people who were inspired by Malmsteen were seeing only the speed. And again, I don't want to make name, I don't want to criticize anybody right now. It's just my observation, essentially, that a lot of them copied the speed, the interesting thing, but not the phrasing, not the great vibrato, not the great bends, all this kind of thing. And I think anybody who really cares about phrasing should really give a chance to Malmsteen, just to hear what he's doing, because that was revolutionary on itself, that kind of vibrato. I haven't seen people doing that kind of vibrato before him. So maybe there are, I'm not saying no, but anyway, my opinion, we had a lot of conversation about this, so I wanted to ask this for my followers here. Okay, there's another thing I want to ask you. That is one thing that and again, it's related to what we were saying just a moment ago, but one thing I hear a lot over and over again is that people tell me they're afraid of learning music theory because they think that theory will kill their creativity, will kill their self-expression, okay? And again, for me, this is absolutely puzzling. I mean, it's how not knowing something can help you being more creative. And if you know something, it's when you know something, you are more creative. How not knowing something make you more creative? So it's very puzzling for me. And it's very puzzling also because I see the opposite in practice. I see when I teach people some theory, when I learn some theory, they become more creative. Of course, you need to teach theory the right way. They need to learn theory the right way, but that's what I see. And I want your opinion on all that.
Well, I think that when people think that music theory somehow constricts creativity, I think that thought comes from a place of still believing that music theory is a set of rules, and that if you're in a set of rules, you're trapped inside of a box and you can't go outside of the box. The only time that one is trapped inside of a music theory box of rules is when they don't understand enough music theory and they're first learning some of the principles of music theory, and it's being presented as, okay, in this context, here are some principles. You can call them rules if you're not, they're not really rules, but they're simply ways to explain why music feels a certain way. That is the purpose of music theory, to tell you why music feels the way that it does, okay? So one other thing that people don't, I guess, realize is that there is nothing that you or I or anyone listening to us now could ever do on the guitar or any other instrument, at least in a tonal context. And this also would be true beyond tonality. But at least within a tonal context, there's nothing you could create. There's nothing you could play. There's nothing you could even conceive of that music theory cannot explain why it feels the way that it does. Okay, there is a theory for everything you could possibly do, at least in a tonal context, but even outside of that. So getting back to your main point of your question, I agree with you 100%. Music theory unlocks creativity. It unlocks it. It unleashes it. Okay? People who think that music theory restricts creativity tend not to really understand a lot of music theory beyond a surface level. Okay? And certainly, as I said, within tonal music, there's nothing that one could play that music theory can't explain. All right? Now, thinking that music theory can't explain anything that we could create is like thinking that Google doesn't know what you do online, or the British government doesn't know where you go, what you do, and who you're traveling, or where you're traveling if you're around London. They got cameras everywhere, okay? They know, all right? They know what you're doing. They know where you are. They know who you are, all right? Music theory is similar in that anything that you can do, music theory can explain. That means, why is that relevant to creativity? It's relevant because if you know what those possibilities are, and you listen to music that you find to be interesting, expressive, creative, or whatever, any composer, guitar player, songwriter, or whatever, you can then learn and identify, this is how these emotions were created. I can learn it, I can study it, and now I can use it in my own way, in my own context. All right. And you can find many different examples, which you take a certain music theory principle and you can find almost an infinite examples of how these principles were applied. So the more that you know, the more you can see, oh, well, this little idea, this concept of music theory can be applied in 1,000 different ways. Let's go explore those. Okay. So if our primary goal, and it may not be for everybody, but it is for me, if our primary goal is to express emotion, then it seems to me that knowing exactly where those specific emotions are on the guitar would be critically important. I think we have an echo here, Tommaso. So if I told your audience that there are 13 primary elements of emotion in music in a given snapshot of time, if I make that statement, if I say, guess what, everybody, there are 13 primary elements of emotion in music within a snapshot of time, do you think that they'd really like to know what those 13 things are? And by the way, there are 13 primary elements of emotion in music. Now, I've developed this theory on my own about exactly this, and that these 13 primary elements of emotion in music, it's part of a new course that I'm working on. It's not done or available yet. But the point is that these elements tell you not only how emotion is created, but how the different emotional layers interact. That would be very useful for one to know, whether they want to write songs or just jam with their friends and improvising, or even if they're not on the, even if they're not creative and want to create their own music, if they just like to play other people's songs, if they can break it down and know and see, how does this stuff work? Why does it work? Why do I feel the way I do when I listen to this part of this song? So, I mean, I bet the guys who say, music theory kills creativity would probably like to know what those 13 primary elements are. But we wouldn't even be able to tell them if he doesn't want to hear it. Meaning, if someone has it in their mind that music theory if music theory restricts creativity, that would mean that he would have to say, nope, don't tell me. Hold off. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear about your 13 elements. I don't want to hear about your theory of emotion and music. Don't tell me, because knowing this information would hurt me. It would make me not be able to be expressive on the guitar. So please withhold information. Don't. I mean, you see, it kind of sounds ridiculous now when you put it in that way, that knowing more information would somehow hurt you. I mean, imagine if we made those statements about anything else. I don't know, math or cooking or anything. It would just kind of seem a little bit silly, I think, in my opinion anyway. So could you discover those 13 things without knowledge of music theory? Probably not, because in order to understand some of them, you would have to have some level of music theory knowledge behind you. That doesn't mean that people who don't know music theory can't be expressive. I'm not saying that. It's just going to be harder and it's going to take longer. So that's a choice that everybody can make.
One thing that always surprised me is when people start like, I don't know any theory. And okay, can you play a chord? Yes. Okay, so you know some music theory. Okay, because somehow some people, when they know something, chords, scales, etc., they don't think of music theory as them as music theory anymore. And like, do you realize that pretty much every time you sing something, you're singing a scale? Okay, whether you call it a scale or not, it's still a scale. Now, if you can call it a scale, if you know how it's built, if you know all the internal relationship between the notes and how they connect to each other, you have more power, not less, and you're still doing what you're doing. I'm not eliminating any kind of instinct you might have. I'm just connecting this instinct to an explicit representation of the whole thing that you can manipulate. Sorry for the technical thing, but it works much better this way, essentially. It's not subtracting from anything people have. It's always adding. It's always making it better, clearer, more useful. Or at least, again, that's how I see it, the way I teach. There were some people asking how to start learning music theory without a teacher. There was an answer here, and I want to comment on that answer. Somebody was writing that you can study music theory even without a teacher, just by book. There is plenty. My comment on this is, don't. Reading music theory book sucks. Okay, I do it. It's my job, for instance. It's my job to know as much music theory as I can. And where I am, I'm reading a lot of music theory books. But let me tell you one thing, guys. You have to spend hours and hours and hours on every page of every music theory book you read to understand what they're saying, why they're saying it, what they mean. And if you don't have any context, I mean, here's my problem. Music theory books today, most music theory books today, read a lot like medicine books written in the Middle Age. Meaning, they don't start telling you how humans are made. They start telling you all this strange theory of strange spirits and how if you do something else is supposed to happen, but they never tried, okay? In the Middle Age, when somebody was sick, they were bloodletting them. They were taking out blood, which is not the right thing to do. Okay, why? Because they were thinking that it was a bad fluid inside the blood, and you have to take out the poison. Reasoning behind this, zero. Music theory books work pretty much the same right now. They tell you there is this thing. It's a major scale. Okay, what is this? Why is that? Well, how will we use it? And we can make those code. Okay, why? How? And then they just start and now put together this. It doesn't make any sense. Reading a music theory book from the beginning, it doesn't make any sense. There is a reason for that. Those books have been made as textbooks to be used in a classroom with a teacher explaining you. So just going around buying music, and again, what music theory book you buy? First of all, they're really not cheap, okay? Because good music theory book come at definitely at 3 digits of price. But how do you know you have the right one? And I'm speaking in first person here, because when I was 15 and I started learning something about music, I wanted to know more about that, and I bought a book, and I thought it was exactly the right book for me, and it was a book of jazz arranging. So, which is the wrong thing completely for me. It was fun, but the thing is, it was like the fourth or fifth book in a series, but it wasn't written on the cover. So I was missing like 4 books before that, and there was no way I could understand what was in that book. It was teaching me specific skills. It was teaching me specific ways of putting music together, but I had no idea what it was talking about. I had no idea what a chord was, for instance. So I totally don't recommend buying books around. I recommend asking somebody who knows. Guys, write me an email. Write Tommaso an email. Ask us what you can do. I have courses. Tommaso has courses. You don't have to take our courses, but I can tell they are pretty good. Okay. If you need something about that, you can ask us. There is really no problem. But don't go at it by yourself, because it's frustrating. Okay. And then, of course, you get out of this thinking that music theory does not work, that there are problems, that it's not connected to music, because nobody ever shows you the connection. Okay. When I started having a teacher, and my first teacher was not Tommaso, but then later I went with Tommaso, and when I started having a teacher, everything made more sense. When I found the right teacher, which was Mr. Tommaso here, everything went even faster. Okay, so that's the idea. Don't go at it by yourself. Okay, Tommaso.
Yes.
I also wanted to ask you about. I know you have an ebook out that makes an example, a very interesting example, starting from Italian food and applying it to guitar. So I'd like you to talk about that. So just give me a moment here.
Ready for me to respond to that, Tommaso?
I would like you to talk about this book. Yes. And what's inside, because I found that example very interesting, and the whole book is very interesting.
Yeah, well, essentially, let me just give you a brief rundown of what this is about. So learning to master guitar, this is not specific to music theory, of course, it's broader than that. But learning to master guitar is a multi-step process, but not a process that is linear. It's not here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. That's not really how mastering any instrument, and specifically guitar, works, right? It's more layers that integrate with each other. All right. So in this ebook, I can give you guys, or I'll tell you what's in there, is that there are 4 steps. They're really pillars here, but they're integrated, all right, that make mastering guitar more reliably predictive, meaning that it makes it easier to master guitar, and it makes the process in the medium and longer term go faster because they're integrated and layered together. Okay, so that's one thing. And then I've got a 9-step checklist. It's in a video for bulletproof technique that helps people to learn not only how to develop the technique, but how to remove the obstacles in the way of that development of technique. So most people think about technique as either there's stuff to learn or there are bad habits to remove. And that is true. Both are true, but there's more to it than just that. So removing obstacles is part of it. Increasing skills is part of it. But the most important part of guitar, specifically with technique, but really with everything, is the integration of different skills together, and integration of skills and knowledge together. So, that's one of the things that I focus on mostly with teaching, is presenting skills, knowledge, removing obstacles that people have, but then integrating all of that together in a way that makes sense and in a way that eliminates these wide gaps or holes in people's knowledge that prevent them from getting to the goal that they want. So not every goal that a student could have requires them to learn everything about guitar. All right. Some goals that people have don't require learning everything that there is, but each goal has a certain combination of skills and knowledge that are required. Right. And the integration of those skills is everything. So that's a big part of what I focus on in there.
Good. And since people were asking how to learn music theory, where to get started, I have a thing of my own too. I have a book called Beginning Music Theory. It's a free ebook, completely free. You guys go at this link, you can find it. And this ebook tells you where to start with completely zero previous knowledge. So if you know nothing, or if you want to make sure that you have the basics right, if you're not missing anything, there are no holes in your knowledge, that will be the thing to take. Again, completely free. Go at this link, musictheoryforguitar.com/beginning music theory guide, and you can download it. There are a few audio examples. There are a few exercises inside to get you guys started. So you can get something, you can get started. You can see how the whole thing works. And very good. Okay, Tommaso, thank you for coming here today. I know you're a busy guy. Okay, I know you have a lot of things to do. So thank you for taking the time to talk with me and all my audience. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Very good. Okay, guys. So we are done for today, Theory Talk Live. And until next time, enjoy.